Hostettler, what are you doing at CPAC?
Well, I'm here to take part in a foreign policy panel discussion on Friday at 5 p.m. And we're going to talk about a conservative foreign policy. Foreign policy is an issue that's very important today and very important to the conservative movement. Where do we go from here on foreign policy?
Talk a little bit about that. We've been, for the last 7 years, confronted a war on terror, two-front battle in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now a new administration, certainly some changes taking place. What's your perspective on where we sit and where we're going?
Well, my perspective as one of 6 members of the House on the Republican side that actually voted against the resolution based on the intelligence of weapons of mass destruction, I think we need to take a step back as conservatives, see the impact of that decision, recognizing that Democrats played a major part in that as well. The Democrats controlled the Senate. Tom Daschle was the sponsor of the war resolution in the Senate. And so it's an issue that we need to address as conservatives to say what should we do in the future with regard to foreign policy and how has that decision with regard to Iraq impacted us. And then secondly, we do need to increase our presence in Afghanistan. 9/11 made it very clear that there are forces out there that would do us harm and would come onto our soil and do that. And so we need to increase our presence in Afghanistan, finish that fight there, and send that message to the world.
Can you talk a little bit about the changes at Guantanamo and just what's going on there in your perspective?
Well, the president's nominee at that time for the Director of National Intelligence, Admiral Blair, said that this was essentially a very symbolic move. And President Obama, when he signed the executive order suggesting the elimination of Guantanamo Bay as a detention facility, made it very clear that many of the detainees that we have now will never see an Article III court. So he is essentially perpetuating the Bush administration policy on detention, which I supported. But President Obama is making a lot of enemies on the left, you might say, by recognizing that there are a lot of these folks that we simply can't give Article III regular federal judicial proceedings to because of the nature of the evidence, the classified nature of the evidence. So it is quite honestly, it is the two-faced nature of this administration's policy that I think we're going to see on a variety of issues, and that America is going to realize just how lacking Barack Obama is in his capacity as president, to have to say one thing to get elected and do something completely different as president.
Let me switch gears on you a little bit. You're a Hoosier State Republican, and your state voted for Barack Obama first time since 1964. What went on in Indiana? What changed? And what do you think the state is of Indiana politics and the conservative movement?
Well, I think that the idea of change permeated politics even in Indiana in 2008, and that as in 1964, to a certain extent, by Johnson suggesting he was not going to escalate operations in Vietnam, and Senator Goldwater having a different perspective, that carried the day there. Well, 2008, we had Barack Obama at least saying he was going to eliminate our presence from Iraq. We know now that that's not true and that's not going to happen. But I think that message, just as it did in 1964, that idea of getting out of an unpopular war was the deciding factor in Indiana. Now, as I said, Barack Obama has no intention of pulling us out of Iraq altogether, but it helped him win the state of Indiana, just as Lyndon Baines Johnson, who a year after he was elected, escalated operations in Vietnam.
What's your advice for organizations like the American Future Fund, other organizations like us, looking forward, looking into the future, with the challenges presented by the Obama administration and the Congress? What role do organizations like this play?
I think folks like the American Future Fund play a big role in keeping everyone honest, including even Republicans. As folks know, Republicans kind of left the reservation with regard to spending overall, discretionary spending, entitlement expansion with Medicare prescription drugs. And folks like the American Future Fund need to hold, obviously, Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi's feet to the fire, and that's going to be an easy job. And it's going to be a very necessary job. To make sure that the next generation of conservative leadership in Washington, D.C. has those foundational principles that are going to not only be good for the party and for the conservative movement specifically, but quite honestly, good for the country.
Okay, great. One last thing, if folks want to find you or follow you or keep up with you and where you're at, how would they do that?
They can do that by going to www.johnhostettler.com, or for information about my book, they can go to www.nothingforthenation.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.